in the absence of any evidence whatsoever, it is inappropriate to believe in God. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to welcome Mr. Hassan Choudhury for his 10 minutes. My technician. Someone can sort it out. Sure.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. And my warmest greetings to everyone here, and my thanks to Imperial College Student Union Philosophy Society for the invite. I'd like to begin by setting a premise, and in my 10 minutes I'm going to set a premise for Muhammad Omar to give the proof. So my 10 minutes is about a premise. Before we discuss a God, before we discuss a creator, we must first establish creation. Makes sense, right? It's a circular argument to discuss a creator before we discuss creation. So that's only two options left for us. The two options. Option one, if the universe is eternal, uncaused, uncreated, then there's no creator. There's no creator because there's no creation. Option two, the reality within which we exist is limited, dependent, finite. Then it is created and we can prove a creator. So, the discussion is about creation, and creation equals a creator. But how do we approach this question? Because this is the central question. It's not about God, it's about whether there's creation. If we approach it incorrectly, we will come up with the wrong answers. And Professor Atkins touched on that. Three approaches. One is faith, one is science, and the other I shall call a rational method. So if I'm going to talk about faith, I want to define it. I'm talking about blind faith, leaps of faith. And the problem with this approach is that it's not built upon thinking. It's emotional. And emotions confirm absolutely nothing. Can you tell me if faith can help you confirm what planet you're on? Can faith tell you the price of gold? Can faith tell you I had breakfast this morning? Faith confirms nothing. And therefore we eliminate it as an option, as an approach. So, blind faith is irrational. Now let's move to the second approach, science. Now you might ask yourself, what's wrong with science? Well, nothing's wrong with science. Without science, we'd have no anatomy, no toxicology, no fluid dynamics, no seismology, or my field, epidemiology. So it's not about whether science is good or bad. That's just silly. The question is whether science is appropriate as an approach for the question of whether there's creation or not. So let me be specific what I mean when I say science. I mean the scientific method. I mean empiricism. It's what we do when we go to school and we do tests, or go to college, university, and make science experiments. Aim, hypothesis, we design an experiment and we test, observe, record. We test, observe, record. Because we need to reproduce our findings, otherwise it's not scientific. Then we conclude and evaluate. So that and that alone is a scientific method. Now, I'm going to say something about this method. It's limited. Now, of course, everything is limited, but the scientific method is limited in one specific way. It's limited because it can only deal with tangible things. It can only deal with things it can test. It's a self-defined limit. It's a necessary limit in science. So if it can only deal with things it can test, what about the intangible? What about the things it cannot sense? How about the soul? How about the mind? How about ideas? Can the scientific method deal with ideas? Can the scientific method deal with honor? Would you like to think of a scientific experiment that could deal with honor? What would you test? What would you observe? What would you record? How would you reproduce your findings? The scientific method doesn't deal with these issues, intangible issues. So, now let me take you to this. Imagine I give you a painting. There's lots of tests we could do on this painting. We could do microscopic analysis. We could use monochromatic lights. We could use spectroscopic analysis, a dirofluxometer. We could check the age and the authenticity of this painting. But let me ask you this. If all you had was the painting and you took it into your lab, could you prove a painter using the scientific method? Using the scientific method, using your aim and hypothesis and your design and your test, observe, record, test, observe, record. Could you use the scientific method to establish a painter? Anyone?
No way.
Yes. So what would this experiment look like? Because all you have is a painter in front of you, right? You have a painter, you can test the painter. But what if you don't have the painter? What if all you have is a painting? What if all you have is the pizza? Are you going to tell me that you can prove, just by looking, just by examining, just by testing your pizza, that it was a pizza delivery boy in a little red scooter? Tell me. The scientific method cannot deal with intangibles. The scientific method cannot deal with things it cannot test. And there's no longer a pizza delivery boy there to test. There's no longer a painter there to test. The scientific method isn't appropriate. And so, if we cannot prove the painter, and if we cannot prove the pizza delivery boy, because they're no longer there to test, because all we have is the painting, and all we have is the pizza, well, let me take it back to the discussion we're having. All we have is the universe. That's all we have to test. Can we do a test to prove or disprove a creator using the scientific method? And the simple truth is you can't. It's not because science is bad. It's because science is only going to deal with what it can test. It doesn't deal with whether something was made by somebody else and who that person was, what the characteristic of what that person is. It only deals with the tangible. And so it's not an appropriate tool for this particular discussion. In fact, because it doesn't deal with some things, such as the intangible, such as love and hate, such as good and bad, pretty and ugly, patience, status, friendship, leadership, integrity, pride. Because it doesn't deal with these things, it's not the basis of thinking. Because it doesn't apply everything. So that leaves us needing to find something else, another approach, for which I remember telling you was the third approach, a rational approach. So let me define the rational approach. Look around you. The images of what you see transfer into your head. And then you try to ponder over them. But there's a problem. The problem is you can sense something all you like, for as long as you like. But if you have no information about it, you cannot think about it. So you need reality, because you can't sense something that's not there. You need sensation, you need information about it, and then it leads to a judgment. So let me explain with an example. You're in a cave in Egypt. You see hieroglyphs. If you have no information about the hieroglyphs, can you decipher them? Can you decode them, no matter how long you look? Or will you end up looking at these hieroglyphs for a very long time and never find out? You need information about what these codes mean. In order to think, you need sensation and information. Now, the reason why this is important is because this is the basis of thinking. It's the basis of thinking because Even science depends upon previous information. If you were going to do a scientific experiment and you had no information beforehand, you wouldn't know what science was. You wouldn't know what an experiment was. You wouldn't know what a Bunsen burner was. You wouldn't know what watt was. You wouldn't be able to read or write. So you need information to think. And this is where I'm going to leave something for Muhammad Omar to continue later. Imagine somebody says, yes, I know I need previous information to think, but I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore the information that I hold. What happens? This is what happens. Each time you find something new, each time you sense something new, you can't use the information that you have already. That means you have to discover it again. So you go to the toilet, and you look at it and you think, well, is that a toilet? I'll have to discover again. Is that the flush? I'll have to discover it again. Is that a car? I'll have to discover it again. Is that a computer screen? I'll have to discover it again. You cannot use the information that you hold. And the danger with doing this is that you become stuck. You become irrational, not knowing what to do. Because every step you take, you don't know if the ground will swallow you up. Because you can't use the information that you hold. You don't know if the next breath you take will poison you because you're not using the information that you hold. You become irrational if you don't use the information. And that's all I want to leave it at. So Muhammad Umar can use that to continue the thing. Thank you so much.
I'd like to welcome Alex Gabriel for his 10 minutes.
Not sure if this microphone is working, I must say. Am I projecting to a sort of appropriate level in everyone? Hello, I'm a student too, by the way, so I've got my notepad with me. Interesting being on this end of the lecture theatre. I thought that was a very interesting set of statements about science and belief and the way we think about things. But to be totally fair to Hassan, and I know that he was leaving things for Muhammad to say later, I'm not sure there was actually any statement there of what he believes and why, and specifically why he, I presume, thinks a God exists. So, to be totally frank, I'm not sure how I should respond, except to say that there is a certain line of fairly, I suppose, theological argument for God that was coming across there, and I expect that Muhammad will make later. I don't know if anyone's heard of Ray Comfort, who's a Christian apologist in America. Do that if you have. Anyone? Were you the same people who put your hands up and said you didn't believe in God?
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? One of his arguments, and it may be one that is made, I suspect it will be, is that without a painter, you wouldn't know that there was... Sorry, I said that wrong. Is that the universe is complex and beautiful in a way that would suggest it had been made. In the same way that a painting, for example, might be made with a certain craft that would suggest there was an artist there. I suppose, perhaps the most widespread formulation of that argument would be William Paley saying that if we looked at a wristwatch, it would be made with a certain design, a certain complexity, a certain efficiency that would tell us that a human had made it and that it wasn't just there by chance. I think for a number of reasons it is actually quite faulty, and I'm sorry if I'm caricaturing what Muhammad will say. If you're making an argument that I'm wrongly predicting, I apologise. But the thing is, we don't recognise a painting as a painting because we have some kind of inherent ability